Let's start. Let's move it. Let's start immediately. Public question time. I suggest, unless you two wish to speak now and then we discuss your thing later, I suggest we alter standing orders and let people speak to their grant when we come to the grant applications. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah. We are being recorded and it will appear on the council's social media pages. Does anybody want to do an additional recording? No? In which case. Apologies for absence. We have apologies from councillors Hogley, East and Bustard, and the reasons for two of these have been circulated. So are we happy to accept those apologies?
Councillor Dixon as well.
Oh, and we're not, well, we haven't had apologies from Councillor Dixon, but we think he's on holiday.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Councillor Paul Dixon. Are we happy to accept those apologies? Do we have any personal and disclosure of pecuniary interests that need to be declared?
I'm not sure if it really is, but I mean, I'm working with both Simon and Mark at the tackling the day job.
Well, maybe.
And also had conversations with the food festival, but that was more about access to the tourist information than about. I wasn't aware of the application, and it wasn't really this one either. So just
maybe,
to say I'm aware of the organisation.
Well, maybe you should not speak on the tech bit unless we refer to you specifically for some information.
Yeah, but I could not vote. I don't know.
No, I mean we probably need to.
I'm not a trustee or anything, so I
need to work out whether you can vote now. Really,
I don't think, because I'm not a trustee, I'm not a decision maker, and I don't think there is a
okay.
It's another interest. I would say it's other interest as opposed to a
pecuniary interest. Okay.
We all know.
So are we saying he can or he can't vote, Charles?
well, I would say can.
Can.
And
Okay.
can speak as well.
Okay. Any written requests for DPI? No. Items on the agenda in private session. I think item 2223.50 tenancies should be in private session.
Can we move it to the end of the meeting?
Yes, we'll move it right to the
editing
end.
the video easier.
Are you happy to do that?
Yes.
Are you content with the minutes of the previous meeting? Are they noted?
Yep.
Vice Chair. Anybody here willing to be Vice Chair? Okay, we'll move on to the next.
We're deferring that again, aren't we?
We are.
I'm a vice chair of another committee. I mean, I know it's not an overly onerous job unless the chair's on that.
And so far,
Is that,
I don't think the Vice Chair has been called on for anything at all this year, for a year. I mean, for the last year it's been Councillor Paul Dixon and he'd forgotten he was.
Well, I'm interpreting that to be an offer from Doug's to be Vice Chair, which
Yeah.
I will
Which we all accept
propose.
immediately and quickly.
I'll second.
Congratulations, Doug.
Are you willing, Doug?
I am, but this is the first meeting I've got to, and I was surprised at the amount of papers and spreadsheets that are involved reading. But I'm sure I can cope with that.
I would say a lot of the stuff to do with Unity Trust.
Yeah.
Also, we agreed at the last meeting that it's all going to be simplified anyway. Rich is looking at summarising stuff and attaching a bit less.
Is that right?
Had you forgotten that you were doing that?
No, my instruction was to separate off 2 bits from the rest of the stuff. It wasn't to simplify it.
Oh, right. Oh, well. We can revisit
Hopefully
that
it
one.
wasn't to complicate it.
We can revisit that one. Okay, grants. The grants working group and all but Charles, I think, are here. We're making progress and we're at a point now where we want to come to the next full council to get their endorsement of our aims and objectives and proposed exclusions, which I won't enumerate and list here. And we don't have to come back to this committee first because we're a full council subcommittee, not a finance. The other stuff is working on. We are aiming to move on to application and monitoring procedures and how they will work. So that's just for information.
So we just move that we know both of those.
Yes, no, please note that we're making,
There is something on that, Chair. And from what Rich has said, Rich has given us an update, hasn't he, on how many are in the pipeline. And Rich, did I read this right, that there's only
hang on, what item are you on?
grants?
Are you on number 46?
He's on number 2, he's on part 2.
Part 2 of grants.
Oh, right.
Sorry. Yeah, because Rich, so the grants working group, yeah, that's, Rich has given us a heads up really of how many grants are coming down the line. Really.
Yeah.
And have I read that right, that there's only one that's coming in for projects and events, Rich? So that's really small. I'm surprised that it's that low, that's what I'm saying.
We can well, I think there is, we've had quite a fall off in applications. I think COVID and people stopped doing stuff in COVID. But we need to continue our publicity and making sure people are aware of that we do provide grants and that they can come to us. We've got to work hard at that.
Yeah, I'm surprised we've not had more of the, you know, the usual suspects, to be honest. You know, the sort of annual events kind of stuff.
Because I know my concern on the grants working group is that we tend to get too many and we spend it all. We could spend it all in September, so there's nothing there for April, but
Which is the only way you can do it, because there's no way you can tell in September that something better is going to come in April.
Yeah.
So yes, it continues to be a challenge, and we will continue to chip away at the whole publicity thing. I mean, one thing is, and I was disappointed, I was going to mention this later, but for instance, Honley got a grant from us for the apple orchard, and there was a thing in the last Honley flyer and in this Honley flyer talking about them and the trees, but no mention of the grant from them. So I will drop a note to Steve Henry to say, do you mind mentioning us next time you get a grant?
I think he did on the Facebook page, I'm sure he did.
You didn't do it in the flyer.
Yeah.
Right, and yes, a list, can we note that there's a list on the web page, on the grants page?
Thank you.
Okay, grant application, sorry if I sit through that. We've got the Food and Drink Festival first on here. Do we have anybody who wants to
We can swap them over.
yeah, we'll do the tech first.
What's the guy called from Food Drink? He's in the Isle of Wight anyway, so he's not going to be.
Alright, well we'll consider that one. So we'll do the tech first. We've received your application. Would you like to say anything in support of it?
Well, yeah, a brief overview of what we're doing. At the moment, the tech house doesn't have a kitchen; it has a kitchenette, but we wanted to put an actual working kitchen in. That will be up to restaurant standards, but also accessible. We are finding that we're getting asked a lot from food banks about, do you do any food tech courses? Feed a family for a fiver kind of thing. So that's something we think of looking at. We work closely with the GP surgery, and signposting is a big thing, and having a kitchen that people can use will not only get people talking to each other, who generally are homebound, but it'll get them all interacting with each other. But there's a big problem with anorexia is the one word? Eating disorder, sorry, I went out my head there. With eating disorders. So when we've spoken to the doctor's surgery about this, it's something that they would like to use as well. We've also got Outlookers, which is a sight loss charity, which use the tech. They come in at the moment once a month, but they're looking at going bi-weekly. They've shown interest in using it because what they do is they aid people with sight loss. So they have various different machines and aids that can help them. So if they could take the kitchen over, people learn how to start off simply boiling an egg, we'll get to souffle in 6 months kind of thing. So that's another reason for it. But also youth activities. There are youth activities in Home Firth already. But if we could offer something with catering as well, that would be another draw to get people in. But on the back of all of this, if we've got something regular going, we would also be looking at opening the cafe up, for example, on a Saturday morning, so to start off with tea and cake, then move to quiche and jacket potato and move up the scale, but actually get it going as a place for people to go. I'm very keen on cooking, if no one.
Just upskilled.
Yeah, no, yeah. Margaret's going for Michelin star with it, 12 months, so I'd love to say.
And I think we might pinnacle on pot pie and peas.
That'll be fine, yeah, we're up for that, we're up for that, yeah. So we're not wanting to compete with the food festival or anything, we aren't looking at doing that, it's a totally different thing. It's another feather in our cap is what we're wanting to do. So the money that we've asked for is, well, it's actually just over £10,000, but it's £10,000. The rest of the refurb will be us funding by the TAC. It is for a complete refurb that we've started already with monies that we have had, but everything will conform to standard. So anti-slip coat flooring, wipeable surfaces, wipeable suspended ceiling. All the furniture is movable, so it can be all pulled out for a deep clean. We've done it to a high spec, but trying to make use of the room we've got, but also make it as accessible as possible. So if someone was in a wheelchair, they can still get round. So I don't know if you know the tech at the moment, it's more of a galley kitchen, but we're going to be going into a big square with an offshoot, if you will. So it'll be a lot more accessible for everybody. That's
Thank
in
you.
a nutshell.
Charles?
Yeah, it's been ages since I had a cup of tea at the hatch, if you like, from, but
Yeah.
I can't remember what was on the other side of the hatch, only that it's quite a nice large room on the drinking side of it.
Yes.
So whereabouts are you looking to put the kitchen?
So the kitchen at the moment, you know the cafe. That's where you used to the cafe. Then there's the hatch and there's the kitchenette. The kitchenette is what we inherited when we bought the building. A lot of it is falling to bits. All that's in there at the moment is really a fridge, a microwave, and a kettle. There are units, but they've got random cups and saucers in there. So the idea is to take the back wall down. There was an office behind that.
Okay.
So we've actually put in gents' toilets, thank you very much. So we put in gents' toilets in half that space, the other half is where we're looking at extending the kitchen into, and it works out at 4.5 by 4.5 metres. Yeah, so that's where we'll be going into. Yes. I will more than happily do a tour and free tea. If you want to come down and go, that's fine.
I think that the tech has been an incredible success in reaching those people who don't know what, who don't normally engage. And I've been a couple of times to the Thursday morning sessions, and there are people there that are, they used to say they were hard to engage, or you really say that, but it's just it's just wonderful, like the breadth of people that you've got there, and I think you're managing to do something, I think, that's really, really difficult. So I'm definitely very much in support of this for all the reasons you've said.
The vision for the building is to be done for everybody, and the notion of adult education is sort of quite sort of middle class female, sort of let's go and do some flower arranging. So just to try and open it up and say that the buildings that are warm and loving for anybody who wants to come in and mix, it's not just that building, it's what it's doing for the rest of Hereford as well, because it's a draw and it's a facility. So more than
Sorry, you aren't actually, you've had your speaking bit, and you were right, allowed to answer questions, but there's another question waiting.
Mine is a question, if that's all right. I think I know the answer to this, because I don't know what the ins and outs of your financial situation, but on the application form, because you've put in figures for the year ending March 21, which you have the previous accounts, it shows that you've got an income of 271 and an expenditure of 100 and reserves of 48. So I'm assuming, because this isn't going to make, as I understand it, the decision tonight will be a recommendation to
It will have to be approved by full council, this is way beyond, and we can make a recommendation as to whether they do or don't give all or some of the amount you've...
So the question is, looking at that, it would suggest you could afford to do it yourselves. And I think the answer is you can't afford to do it yourselves. So do you want to tell us why you can't afford to do it yourselves? Because your figures suggest you've got 170 grand surplus from last year.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's...
If only, yeah. Go on, Margaret, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, that's how the building. We bought the building in March
Right.
22.
So that a lot of that money was effectively...
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It all had to be declared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So-
have you got, we need figures that show what you have got in reserves.
Well, the year end March 2022 are still with the auditor, so that's why we can't
Yeah.
come out. But the reserves at that time were about 50,000, but we've been drawing on the reserves because at the moment, and please keep this confidential, the Techers are a bit at a loss because we're still struggling, like so many other organisations, to get people to use the building. So Simon and Simon have been doing an absolutely fantastic job. And it would look as if we're going to end the year okay.
Yeah.
And then we are using the reserves.
So when will the audit be completed?
End of September.
When's the full council that this will go to?
Next month, is it?
Before that.
September.
It might be worth your putting in a sort of interim, supplying us with an interim saying this is yet to be confirmed by an auditor, but our current reserves are this much.
What is the date of the
Mid-September, I think it might be the 17th.
in 3rd of October.
3rd of October.
Yeah, so
But the papers go out a week ahead.
they do.
It's just,
But it would be, it won't be sympathetically received if it looks as though you've got 150,000 in the bank. I can guarantee
We
you
have
that.
had the bank statements.
and there has been mixed degrees of support. I support this. There has been mixed degrees of support about spending any money from the parish, to be honest.
Well, yes, it's a funny area, but that's a different issue. But
But it's easier.
if
to
you
understand
could
that.
just let Rich have some sort of statement of your current reserve standing,
We will have,
it will be helpful.
we will have the audited accounts for our AGM on the 27th of September.
That's when the papers get posted.
No, in which case, that's fine, and submit those, but in the meantime, submit just a statement that you swear to be true, that your current reserves stand at whatever amount it is.
How many bank accounts have you got? How many banks? How many?
Right, we've got three bank accounts.
Three bank accounts.
One is the reserve bank account, one is the money where the hardship fund is kept, and that is under control of the tech, so it shows on our accounts. And then there's an NatWest account, which is the everyday account.
But it's a shame that we're having to add this up, because it would be much easier if you'd submitted a thing saying this is how much we have in the bank.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was an oversight.
Do I have enough?
Because the accounts will give you the figure at the end of March, whereas the position, the bank position, the company's.
Can I ask you if you could go to your latest bank statements, just summarise the total amount you've got sitting in the bank?
This is just one account.
Yeah, go to all three of your bank accounts. Summarise your current status of reserves, let Rich know,
Yeah.
and then you'll have a much stronger case.
So this bank account you've got here, the Tech NatWest Limited. So in that one, I think we've got it up till June. There's about £9,000 in that one,
Yeah.
and it's been coming down. There's 22,000 in January. It's down to 9.
So that's obviously the one you're living off.
We cannot declare the hardship fund account because that money is completely into the green fund.
Okay, well that's fine, if you just say there is an account which is inaccessible, but, yeah. But if you let us know,
That's fine. Do you want me to just email that to you, Rich, or do you want it signed in by a director?
No, you can email.
That's fine.
which because it just, at casual glance, it looks as though you've got 150 grand sitting there, and people go, so why do we want to give them money?
Yeah,
So,
we've got about 37,000.
Councillor Greaves.
Yeah, if I might add, it's not uncommon, this has happened in the past, where there's the surplus. It depends upon the organisation, but certainly where they're spending a lot of money on capital items, then it doesn't necessarily reflect it. But I think Chair's right, mate, that'd be the obvious question. But and then the other bit is what have you got in reserves and what's the plans for that? And, you know, so but are we just noting that today, or are we?
We will be deciding how much and whether and how much to recommend to full council, who can override us, but that we will be deciding that.
Well,
Will this information remain confidential or will it be in the public domain?
which bit?
It'd be in the
All of
public
this is
domain, but your
public
reserves
domain.
should be in the public domain, shouldn't they?
Well,
Do you mean what you plan to use them for?
no, I'm just sort of wondering about it. You know, as you were sort of thinking about conflicts of interest, I'm just sort of wondering about commercial sensitivity.
Well, if you can't declare them, I don't think we can give you a grant. If
Yeah.
you can't be transparent about,
It was the current position rather than the year end. I was just a little bit nervous about that.
well, you've still got to be transparent about it.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we don't really have any choice, and you know, this is public money, and we have to be
Sure.
But, Pat, it is there is a question that says, please describe your current financial reserves and account for expected expenditure from these. So, and on that, you've actually said 28,000, so, which obviously isn't 170. So that question is on the form. I suppose the question is that the latest, most accurate figure, and do you want to edit it? Because that's the, and that these do go on.
Do you want to
they
go
are
back
public
and have a look at your application again and look at the reserves and
Well, I would make a slightly different proposal, which I would be to propose making a full grant, subject to the information being provided, as long as you guys are comfortable you can provide the information. I'm not so concerned about the detail going into a public arena, so if there's something you want publicly redacted, I'm more than happy just to leave that with Chair and the financial officer just to give a comment, if that's the case, but I'm happy to make that proposal now.
is there a seconder for that?
Can I just make the point that in terms of the actual earmark reserve, there's only 10,000 in it,
So
rather
it'll
than
be
10,042 whatever.
Oh yes,
So
so you're not getting the 42. You'll have to have a whip round for the 42.
I'm just saying, you could get it, but it would mean fiddling about.
Well, let's see if we get it.
You can manage without the 42, can't you? I assume, yes. Doug?
So that was my second question, because I couldn't remember what happened previously. So is there money in our ring fence reserves?
Yeah.
We
So
have
already
earmarked,
got
yeah,
the text now,
we have
right?
10,000
It's just
earmarked
$1,000
for the
there.
tech.
Yeah.
So this is a drawdown of something we already expected, we've already put aside.
Yes.
Right, that's what I know there was various ring fence created for various projects.
So for
Yeah.
10,000, if you want, so do I have a second?
Yes, Mary's already seconded it. All those in favour? Okay. Thank you. Sorry to give you more work, but we have to be ultra careful. You know, this is not our money, it's yours.
Yeah.
The only reason I was a bit cautious, Pat, and totally honest about it, is that we don't want to scare people.
Yeah.
Because it is tight.
Yeah.
So
Nevertheless, you have to come clean, I'm afraid, if things are tight.
Sure, I don't mind that, but it's just sort of timing and wanted to give.
Well, if you work together, I'm sure you can come up with something that
I'm sure we can.
enables us, is sufficiently transparent to be clear to the average parishioner that what's going on.
Yeah, that's fine. I just did the last year's figures, that's why I'm all in the bank now, that's what I thought he was asking for. But that's fine, noted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you for your
welcome
time.
to stay through the rest, but don't feel you have to.
I'm going to do my ancestry course now.
Get around it.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope you find somebody who's left vast fortunes
That'd
and
be all
can
right,
never be
wouldn't it?
claimed.
Yeah, if I am actually related to Turn of the Arts.
You can give us some money.
Yeah, we'll all go on holiday and decide how to spend it. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye.
Can I ask a question? Do you also have 10 earmarked for next year, or have we not done next
We
year?
haven't done that yet.
Right.
I mean, I do wonder whether it should just go in the budget rather than it being in the reserve, because it does slightly mess up our.
And it's not going to go away, is it? I mean, they're going to need 10 grand a year for the next 10 years, I would think, without even
If they
thinking.
get it, I think that's the bigger worry, is it? But that's obviously what they're worried about as well.
Yeah, that's the only thing that maybe until they're in premises. Maybe we should keep it as earmarked
Yeah, okay, fair point.
for the time being until we're a bit more. Charles?
Yeah, Chair, and as Doug's rightly pointed out, we do have a question under the finances, but it could possibly be a little bit more detailed question, with a lot more space to answer it. So it might be, so it says, please describe your current financial reserves and account for expected expenditure from these. Well, it might also be useful to start, like say, please describe how your surplus has been used.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
What your current reserves are, and likely outgoings, and just ask, effectively just ask for that up front, because I think it's a legitimate question when you see what looks like 169 grand surplus. You think like,
Where's that gone?
yeah. So I think just querying
Yeah,
how the surplus.
it's quite awkward, isn't it? Because you're always waiting around for the next year's accounts to be published. Because it's
Well, and that's the other bit with it. I think that there's a danger of if you want pounds and pence, you've got to wait for audited figures. But by the time audited figures come out, they're 6 months in arrears, so they're no longer really relevant anyway. For me, I'm quite. It's getting a flavour of it. So I wouldn't necessarily want to know where, if you're, I'd be quite comfortable with sort of 5,000, if you know what I mean, about where it's gone to, what we've used it for. So not having to go down to really small level detail, just a big chunks, but I think it'd be useful to do.
Yeah, well, it's some, I mean, myself and Councillor Blacker have been looking at the application form, and we did look at that bit, didn't we? And
Yes.
it was a bit, because I tried to get them looking a bit more up to date, but it becomes very fiddly.
Yeah.
So we'll have a little look at it and see if there's something we can do like that, even if it is a sort of broad brush.
We could ask for
Yeah,
people's latest estimates and get them to declare them to the
Yeah.
best of their knowledge. That
Yeah,
is
that's
true.
probably a good idea.
And then use their estimates rather than insist on the language. I mean, yes, we would want to see the latest audit figures, but they'll be miles out of date.
Or like ask for large areas of spend, or like
Well, we can't say what have you spent your money on. We can say that we can ask that question when they've suddenly gone from 160 to 128, but I don't think we can in general say we want to know what you spend your money on.
Well, it's what you spend surplus on, and that'd be a legitimate question for anybody if they actually have a surplus. But that's what I'm saying about not going to. So if we were something like saying we want to know about what you used your surplus and reserves for, we're talking amounts items at £5 grand or above. Well, if somebody's surplus is only £2 grand, we're not really going to be asking, because that kind of just evaporates easily, doesn't it?
Did we make that clear that we wanted to know what the surplus had been spent on? Is it worth your giving them a ring?
I can talk to them about that.
I mean, in a way, the tech is kind of one on its own, isn't it, really? The amount of money involved is far in excess of what most organisations that we're giving grants to, so perhaps it does need slightly different handling.
And we do have to be very careful. I mean, if they are in as much danger as Margaret kind of suggested they might be, then we should be thinking twice about giving them any money at all.
No, I think that's
You
possibly
know,
more.
having a conversation on camera that is difficult.
Yeah, no. I'm raising the issue for us to discuss. I'm simply saying, for us to do financial risk management, we have to consider if an organisation is too much of a risk to invest in. Now, my feeling is that they are not. There is a temporary,
We've kind of, with previous council composition, we've kind of been in this area before, and sometimes that ends up taking down the rabbit hole to the point where you say, if you're financially solvent and you're running a surplus, you don't need our help, so goodbye. And if you're not, we won't give you one. Yes. So it is that bit of, I think there's an element of it of you know, I would hope to think that we wouldn't throw money at a project that we didn't have some comprehension of, but you look, I would say you're looking at the track record, what's there, you know, for the tech, I wouldn't say it's a case of it failing. I would probably say it's a case of if the finances don't recover, they're going to have to look at rolling back on some of the work that they're doing. But I don't see it as
I
particularly.
think we should use the information we get as to how the savings have been spent to inform how much we earmark next year.
I mean, I know a bit about it because, like I said, I've had a tour around and they've got the 170, basically they pay for the second 2 months, so they pay for half of it and then they've just paid the other half, which is where the 170's come. What they've got is a massive list of capital projects for pretty much each and every room in there. So what I don't know is what they plan to do next. So I know the kitchen's now, but I know there's some space downstairs that they were talking about refurbishing into art spaces and music rooms. But I suppose it'd be helpful to know what their capital programme looks like, because I can't imagine that there wouldn't be hundreds of thousands of investment in the next 5 years if they can raise
And they
money.
can't rely on us for that.
Well,
I mean, we
exactly.
don't spend that much on this building, which is
Yeah.
substantially bigger and just as expensive to maintain and improve.
But that's the problem for them, I think. Until they've got it up to a spec, it's less attractive and it's harder to heat, and then your repairs are also higher because it's not in good order. And they managed to raise the money to pay for it, and now they need to raise the money to not only run it but also improve it. It's a challenge. It's a huge
Well,
challenge.
maybe they should have a talk with Dawn downstairs. I mean, she has done a very good job on the grant element of fundraising and getting those sorts of monies in. She's finding private investment more challenging, but it might be worth their fixing to have a chat with her. Because she's done it. I mean, this building gets all sorts of money from all over the place. And indeed Judith, who also knows about historic buildings. So, would you, perhaps we should drop them a note, or will you tell them that you're working with them? Or?
Yeah, I think they are rival businesses, that's the other thing.
They are.
They're rivals, effectively.
Yeah.
Well, they're not
In
really
their
rivals.
own
They're not.
No.
This room, especially this building, has huge spaces which nobody else can
I
provide.
don't think she would share.
I don't know.
Wouldn't she?
I don't think she'd share sort of information about how they get their grants, because it becomes a competitive issue, doesn't it?
They need to go to a drop-in session at Holly Library on
The 7th?
the 7th of September, Tuesday evening. I saw it in
Sixth.
today's Holly flyer. I don't know who's organised it. It must be library services. It was you.
Yeah, it's not like this.
Well, why didn't you invite us?
Because I haven't promoted it yet properly. This making the right connections thing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just says drop in about finance. I've got the
Mm.
photograph
Yeah,
of my
that's
phone.
it.
Oh no, that's something.
In
Yeah,
the
that's
library.
the thing.
In the Holly Library
Yeah,
on
no, I know what
Tuesday.
you mean.
And,
No, they know about that.
Well, the tech should go to that.
No, well, the tech, to be honest, like all the others are on the mailing list for all the different.
This isn't on the mailing list. I saw it by accident.
No, that's because we haven't pushed it out yet. But it's that's on the mailing list that people they
Well,
lose.
you left it late.
But the tech is organising a single one anyway. There's another one to happen at the exact same time.
But I mean, there is a lot of help out there, much of it online, about getting grants. And we're talking here about much larger sums of money, aren't we, really,
Yeah.
that most people are chasing. It's not difficult to find information on the grants that are available. But, it's just nobody has time to do it, I think that's probably
Yeah, YLCA was something they sent around as an email. Did I forget to put it on this agenda? What was the story about that? Did I forget to put it on?
We haven't had, they emailed us to say you're going to get an email saying, and we haven't yet had that email.
So they're setting up like a grants. They want to charge us for a grants publication, basically. YLCA this is.
Yeah,
So I'm just for
I
magazines.
haven't replied.
it's all, to be honest, we've got two specialists. I know we've drifted way off agenda. So third sector leaders who are funded by the council to look after the voluntary sector, they subscribe to various grants portals where you can get information, and also the council's third sector team, and Aaron's down there all the time, so they're fully connected to these
Right.
people,
Okay.
and they can run these online searches to see what's available, because there's some stuff like lottery that's always there, but then there's other little things that pop up now and again, or specialist green heating initiatives or whatever. And all, if you're on the right mailing list, which is what that event's about, then you'll hopefully get the heads up about all the different schemes. But it is very complicated, but I don't think we need a third.
No, I think we'd kicked it in to the curb in our heads already, but yeah.
And Jen and I wish to attend your bit and make people aware of us as a grant giving body.
I'll talk to you outside the meeting because it's not that type of event. There's other events where you could come and say that, but that isn't. This is a one-to-one surgery to check that people are on the right mail lists. It's not stand up a pitch and present. It's sit down on the computer. Are you on that? Are you on that? Are you on that?
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. We'll move on.
But the parish could perhaps come, make sure they're on there.
People, well, can you add the parish council as a source of grants, but you have to go to the web page, they won't email you. Maybe we should be emailing people, we can come back to it.
You can put them on the
Oh,
third sector
Michelle's
page. Well, maybe if you attended
Michelle's
that event, you
working
could
on
put it
it.
on the third sector page.
What did you say, Dad?
If you attended that event, I could add you to the third sector leaders web pages where they do publish grants
Yeah,
information. So
yeah.
there is a note in that actually. But you'll be going as somebody to attend the surgery about yourself, if that makes sense.
Yes. That's right, that was our intention. Yes, not for advice. Okay, back to the Food and Drink Festival. I mean, you've all seen the application, it seems fairly straightforward to me. Is there any question or discussion we need to have? Hang on, Charles.
Yeah, I do sometimes wonder why we have these as constantly recurring grants rather than just to establish almost like a permanent funding stream. So
This is the topic of the grants working subcommittee.
and some of these I would say it's almost a bit like they've got so much other stuff to do, and whilst there's almost an assumption that they will get it, there's always the worry that they won't. And I just think like.
I don't think they've ever applied to us.
From our perspective, it might just be easier just to set it up.
But they don't apply every year. They're not like the film and the folk and the art.
Well,
They last year or the year before we organised water and a special water machine.
Yes, and we're doing the same. Well,
We're just pumping it this time.
No, I think we did. I think it was just a tap last time.
Did we? Anyway, whatever. But I don't think they do come to us regularly.
They
But
don't.
what you say is true, and the grants subcommittee is looking at these people who come every year. Are there ways of simplifying?
It's not as easy as you would think.
Yes, and it isn't as straightforward as you imagine for the whole risk management, financial risk management thing. But
well,
anyway, do we? Mary, you had.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the information they put under finances is a little odd, really. I mean, I think we should give them a grant, but it just again, I think, considering what we just said about it, is perhaps we do need perhaps to look at and perhaps put some more notes in advising people how to finish.
Yes, in some ways, kind of be prepared to send it back and say, look, you're well on the way, but you need to do A, B, and C.
Because we know it is an issue that other people will pick up on as well.
That's more work for you, Rich.
Because they haven't actually put any.
Well, they've said please find attached our published accounts, so they didn't answer the question, but they said that Richard got their accounts, didn't they?
Yeah.
But I thought that was, but it's interesting as a CIC, which is what they are, they say they're carrying a small deficit, but obviously on a bank account, that won't have an overdraft, because they might be able to have an overdraft.
No.
I mean, I I know there's sessions of CIC and I know there's local businesses involved in it, and I support it, it's a great event. I didn't even realise they were all volunteers on that committee, and according to the website they are, so I was satisfied about that. And I don't think £1,000, I mean, it's going to be a really difficult year for them. Huddersfield Food and Drink pulled the plug completely because of the risks this year. So the fact they're going ahead at all, I think, you know, well done to them. And I think it's, if we've got the money, I'm happy to give it. But when they said, on the answer to the question, what we were talking about earlier, we've looked at further options, but no grants appear to be available this year. That just isn't true. They didn't ask the right people the right questions. But I think it's all been it's a small group of volunteers. They've probably spent all this year thinking, shall we, shan't we? And they've come up, you know, quite close to September.
Yes, they've left it pretty late.
But I wish them all the best. If we can support it, we'll do it.
And it's it's a small amount of money for us. So. Do we have a proposer then?
I propose that we
Thank you. Seconded. Thank you, Charles. Mary and Charles. All in favour? Passed. Accounts for payment, next item. Note, the chair hasn't spent anything yet, but will at Christmas. Note the schedules of payment for June and July. Are these noted? Yes.
What letter we on the agenda? I'm going to struggle to start keeping it.
Sorry, 222348.
48 part 2.
Parts 1 and 2. We've noted part 1, we're noting part 2 now.
I can see that.
And then part 3. Oh well, and then there's Richard's note about double paying and then paying back and not paying and holding back and then paying some more and not paying again.
Yes,
Which we know.
it's amazing how much extra work I create for myself by making mistakes. It costs me hours and hours to sort that.
For the sake of 230 odd quid, yes. We should consider approving the pending month-to-date transactions. Do we approve them?
Yes,
Approve, okay.
Yes, excellent.
And then the payments, and I've seen, I don't know whether you all have or it was just me as chair, Rachel's notes about the money for these things for Platinum. Do we approve those?
The tree planting.
The hay.
Yeah, the trees and the plaques.
Yes.
That seemed very cheap for the trees, I thought.
Yes, very.
That's cheap, isn't it?
Woodland Trust, isn't it? So I guess subsidies.
I guess they're a cost from the Woodland Trust, are they? Right, so they're considered and approved. Item 49, to note the accounting summaries. Were there any queries anybody had or confusions about the various accounting summaries? I have to say I didn't see anything in particular that struck me, but then I'm not the best. So, do we need to go through each of these separately, Richard?
No, not really. No, I would suggest you just go through them, as a block.
Okay,
number
so
1 as a block and number 2 as a block.
June 2022. Are we happy with that? Do we vote to support that? Yes. Everybody. That was only one hand. Thank you. It's a small enough quorum. We can do.
Well, I'm going by the letters on the attachment.
Right,
so
now.
but that doesn't seem to.
We're now looking at July 2022, item J.
So I thought we'd done,
And Richard's notes are there explaining what's going around, which so we're working away at those general reserves, which is good.
No, we're not. That's
Oh, it's going up.
extra general reserves, that is.
Oh right. Oh right. Well, never mind. We've got it largely dealt with. So, do we approve that July 2022 item J? Hands up. Yes. Thank you. Income and expenditure items K and L.
So this was.
Do you want to talk?
Yeah, well, this was something that came up last meeting where I think people wanted to consider these reports and see whether they had to actually, whether any sort of action was needed
Yes.
with regard to them. I pointed out the sort of three things that I saw where things are over budget or potentially going to be over budget. I don't know whether other people saw anything else, but I think in the case of those three, with regard to the insurance, there's not an awful lot we can do about that. You'll remember that we didn't get insurance, so it was a kind of a last minute and the only one we could get. And then the phone box, the reason that's over was because council authorised it to be spent from general reserve, so that's going to be over regardless. And then I just said that to keep your eye out for the public toilets, because like it says, it's 40% spent and we're only a third of the way through the year, so just keep your eye on it.
Yeah, I think both with the first and the third item there, really, they all are items we need to have in our mind when we come to budget setting for the future, because
That's absolutely right.
everything's just galloping away, isn't it?
Not just that, but I do think the kind of contract for the toilets and the benches does need looking at, because we are at his mercy. He does just throw a figure to us and we just pay it, because that's the nature of the agreement when it was set up. It's
Well, I think in our subcommittee we talked about looking at all of our contracts, didn't
that
we?
is true, yeah.
And we come to the end of the council at the end of this financial
I mean, what I said to Jen was, I think this year leading on to next year, that we just spin the one we've got, and then you've got a new council coming in May, and I think that they should. We'll give them a few months to get used, to get their feet under the table, but then I think that will be an action for that council.
Yes.
To be reviewing not just the maintenance contractors' contracts, but maybe the buses as well.
The buses, the youth service, you know, there's two or three rather
all
big
of these
things.
things. I think the idea of a new council coming in and having a plan for their term of office is obviously would be a good thing. So
Yeah.
That's kind of the idea.
Okay, so do we feel any action is needed? I mean, I'm assuming we're going with Rich's thing. There's nothing we can do about it. We're just noting it, really.
Well, just keep it. You just keep an eye on. Just keep an eye on the toilets, I think.
No, but the question on the agenda is to consider whether action is needed. And
Yeah, that is an action. Is to monitor it.
Check and ask, is there, I think there's different, on the paper, I'm looking at the paper which has got the variance on the budget and stuff. But you mentioned, from what I remember on the agenda item, it talks about overspend on the toilets, but didn't you talk about utility bills? I'm just wondering are we expecting a massive hit for utility bills on the toilet? Is a lot of the toilet costs actually the utility bills? And can we expect those to double or triple?
Not particularly, but I mean, I'll have to have a look to see what the differences are, to be honest.
But there will be a massive hit because there's no cap on businesses.
Well, that's I know we're in a worse. I'm assuming the toilets as a business. I'm assuming that's how they're treated.
I mean, one of our fellow trustees on the Civic, his bills, was it electricity, had gone up 500% already for a business.
What type of contract is your contract?
Well, this is one that, as I said later on, we did pull it out. We did pull it out to this new kind of
Public utilities
broker,
lot,
but haven't heard yet. I'll chase them. I'll chase them in the next week to see if they're doing anything for us.
I mean, we're going to need to make some sort of estimate, and probably we're better to make pessimistic estimates when we come to do next year's budget.
That's a fair point. And you know, we do have more money than we need, so you know, it's
All those reserves that are bothering you could get spent on electricity,
That's bothering me, yeah.
water and electricity.
Very useful.
And then point for earmarked reserves. Do you want to talk about that?
I don't think there's an awful lot to
It's
say
fairly
really.
straightforward,
It just mentions about the fact that I've shut down that one earmark reserve, and it just explains where the other where we are with those two. I've emailed the Scouts and Hepworth Playgroup to ask if they're going to call on these earmark reserves that we've got.
I've emailed Councillor Davis to see if they are, because the work on the playing fields has started, It has started in Honey, it's started in the ones over here. And I've emailed Councillor Davis, and Charles, you may know, whether, because the money we earmarked for the play areas were to work with Kirklees, weren't they?
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, the Honey Business Association applied for one from Parish Council, that's been paid over, and that's going to pay for the tree trail, so that money kind of will be going to Kirklees. What came back from Paul this week was to sort of say that actually the ones that he's been dealing with normally south seem to be within budget, which it depends what exactly he means.
Which budget would he mean?
Well, they all have to be within budget, but the difference with it is perhaps when we first looked at it 5 years ago, there would have been a few extra items of equipment, and some of the items of equipment would have been bigger. So it all fits the budget because it has to fit the budget, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So it's not, you know, there'd never be a case, if you like, where parish would be feeling a shortfall for Kirklees. Kirklees wouldn't allow it to be a shortfall. What it's done is just reduce the scope of some of the jobs. And some stuff has then been put, if you like, onto the back burner, which will be when funds are available, which these days could be shorter than ever.
Well, I sent a simple email today, because I suddenly thought this morning there's a question to Paul saying, we've got this amount earmarked, will Kirklees still be wanting it, and if so, when?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bigger conversation to be had, like, so Holland's received 5,000. There will be some play areas that haven't got any work planned. So, for example, Brockholes hasn't. So the main one in Brockholes, that was done about 8 years ago, but there's no current work planned. There's the little top wreck, which Parish Council actually funded the creation of in Brockholes, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, before my time. And then there's like the little one at Oldfield, but that doesn't really need anything much with it. I don't really have sight of what's happening in Hornby South, but obviously the big one, and the one that I visit from time to time, is Sands. So New Mill had quite a big refurb not so long ago. That's in good order. I don't know where the other ones are that have got some size. I think there was one, if you like, around the back of Funfirth High, just off New Mill Road. I think that's had a refurb. The one that's looking a bit ragged these days, I would say, Sands. And I don't know what the plan is for Sands. So maybe it's a case of there just needs to be a bit more of a discussion. But the council expressed a willingness to support. It's paid 5 over in Hornby. I don't know what to say.
Right. Okay, well, we'll see what Councillor Davis says in response to the email this morning. And Doug's?
That means I'm puzzled by this sheet then. So if, on the earmark reserves on 338, it said we put 50, as I understand it, if it says net transfer, that means we put 50,000 in the pot, and it said there's still 50 there. But Charles just said he thought...
No, that's
That
last year.
5 came as a grant.
That was last year. It was
So does that mean the council still haven't drawn any of that 50?
No,
Yes.
zero.
But things like Royal Events, which is still showing us 10,000, hasn't that...
No, that's an earmark. That's not. That's a dip that it's coming from the actual budget. All the wildflower and trees and stuff. That's an actual budget line, not an earmark reserve. That's
I thought when we approved that we were using the...
no, that was Pat's idea in terms of London Bridge and post London Bridge about having.
We put 10 grand aside for that which will happen after London Bridge.
Right, okay. So the only thing that sort of, one of the things that does seem to have shifted then is other assets other in the valley has gone from 11, we transferred, so when you say we transferred 4,700, does that mean 4,700 was allocated to a project?
No, it wasn't really no, basically.
Or these internal money juggling?
Yeah, I mean essentially what that is as it says in the agenda, the only money in that, the two things we actually earmarked for specific projects, i.e. two grants that we awarded where in one case they didn't want it immediately, in the other case we decided not to give them it immediately, which was the Scouts and Hepworth play group.
Yeah.
So that's earmarked for actual things where we've committed money,
Yeah.
but they've not called on it.
Right. Okay. And the other things are effectively we've just set the war chest like we have for the Army Library.
Yeah.
So we've set
Yeah.
10,000 aside, knowing they'll need it at some point.
Yeah.
But they still haven't got the keys yet, so we know so. But yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting coincidence that the tech applied for precisely the amount we have earmarked. I say nothing further.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't precisely the amount we had in that for it.
Well, it was 45 quid over, that's right.
So,
It is all
Yeah,
on the
a little bit more.
website.
Yeah. But yes, it's all published, as Rich says. People can go and look at how much is earmarked for them. I mean, I tell the Civic when there's an update, how much is earmarked. Okay, so are we happy to move on to Mary? Sorry.
Just about, I wanted to exercise about this 50k in children's playgrounds, because we're well into the financial year now, aren't we? And it's a lot of money.
We don't need to do anything with
We
it.
need to do it. I suppose
It's not a budget. You can sit there forever.
We'll just sit there forever.
But-
But that's a bit pointless.
Yeah, well, the
Yes,
thing about
it could be spent on
the
something
thing about
else.
earmark reserve is it's meant to be a plan that you do something with X years down the line or X months down the line.
So we need to be, yes.
We need an update from
So we
Kurt
need-
Lees.
Yeah, so we need to be planning, don't we, how to use it, because sitting in earmark reserve is not actually
Yeah.
doing much, is
Well,
it? And I think we all feel that.
It does help us in terms of our percentage of general
Yeah, but
reserves.
that's, yeah, we can give it in grants, we can give it to the Civic and the Tech tomorrow.
Yeah.
That
So
is
as
true.
soon as when we've heard from Kirk Lees about how they're using money, I think perhaps we need to rethink about
Yes.
other ways of using it really.
Yeah.
Because this point of sitting.
I mean, if
in a
Paul
bank
comes
account
back and
when-
says we will need it and
Yeah,
we'll
then
need
that's-
it in
yeah.
July next year,
If
then
not, we
fine.
need to have a
But, yes.
contingency plan, I think, even if it's something moving into the next
I mean, it's agreed, I think we have a general agreement that we want to focus on youth-orientated
Yeah, yes.
things, so we might well be looking at another youth thing to shift it into if we decide to shift it.
So the playable spaces strategy, it's only midway through. So one of the constraints on that is officer time, and then costs, and then getting contractors. So unless it's already been allocated, it's unlikely, even if it is spent on play, it's unlikely to be drawn down from perhaps maybe 12 months, even longer. Just because if they have a programme, so let's say there was no planned work in Sands, and then we agreed to spend the money on Sands, it will be, that will be easily 2 years' time before anybody's going to get around to actually spade down at Sands doing something just because of how much pipeline there is. I was a bit surprised with what Paul said, because it depends how you look at it. The tricky bit has been that Moira Scarf was the officer who was leading it, and she left Kirklees a couple of months back. So I think in Moira's world, she's a bit like, well, if there's extra money that's coming in, then there's some of the stuff that we're pushing out we
That could
retain,
happen, yeah.
And the interesting bit was, and this might be the thing to think about. We are going a bit off piece here, but just bear with me. There's what they call open age play equipment, and there's also things like they might describe as a trim trail or open air gym. Now, I've never been a fan of an open air gym. You get your cross trainers. There's lots of moving parts. I always think that there's a bit of a novelty. You have, you open it up, you have your photo shoot, and then we live in West Yorkshire, and normally it rains a fair old bit. So, you might have a bit of a band, you might have a little group set up to use it, and then I would have said within like 6 months, like the rest that I seem to see, they just start to rust and get neglected. So the moving parts ones, they don't do it for me, but the ones that do, I like the trim trail ones. So I've seen this in Milton Keynes, I've seen it in Cambridge. So it's almost like your nerd stuff. I wish I'd taken a photo of it. So it's stuff like, it almost looks like a climbing frame, but you can do pull-ups, you can do leg raises on it, you can do monkey bars on it. There are some moving parts, like there might be hand straps and stuff like that. And the advantage with it is adults can use it, teenagers can't really destroy it, but can have a lot of fun liking it.
Trying
but,
to.
But even a 7-year-old, bear in mind this is like, even a 7-year-old can have a bit of a play with it and get something out of it. So that I think the trim trail that's going into People's Park is along that vein, which if you wanted to jog around it and do some press-ups, that's fine. But equally, my kids might be parkouring off of it, and you know, but it's all bomb-proof gear, so it's almost like multi-use, and maybe in terms of we might call it children's playgrounds. You're back to that world of, well, maybe we need to think about
just playground
active lifestyles a bit broader. And there's no shortage of what you can spend the money on in terms of youth provision. I think there is that. That'd be a nice one to get on a regular funding arrangement with our Youth Alliance, so that they can plan, and because when it's paid, when you've got paid workers who are delivering services, even if they're only doing like five hours a week or whatever, it's really helpful for them to know that they've got a job and they're not looking for something else, because you aren't told in time that actually we will be rolling on. You know, this is the bit where we lurch from one year to another. It's difficult for people organising it, but if you're involved in those contracts, you never know where you're at ever, and that's a hard place to be. So I think there's plenty of scope for it, and maybe it might be a case of coming back afterwards. But this could be 3 or 4 years, and then it might be a case of, okay, well, Kirklees, we'd like to put some trim trails in. And you know, maybe we want to look at where there's a bit of elbow room and where there might be some demand for it. So, for example, rather than putting it in the same new mill down in the centre, it might be a case of putting it up off by that wreck at the back of Longfirth High on New Mill Road. It might be a case of putting it in at Sands. But wherever you put it, you want to know it's going to be used. So I would suggest it won't go in at Home Village. You know, it's that kind of thing. But so I think there's no shortage of it. To me, it's just decide what it is.
I think
those like yellow cross trainers. I just think the tendency to £2,000 worth of equipment, the tendency to a rust bucket.
So I think we've got to the point where we probably agree that if Kirklees can't foresee spending this in the next 18 months, we might look at other ways of spending it. We need to chase Kirklees and say, well, when are you likely to draw this down? And if it's more than 18 months or 2 years away, then I think we should spend it on some other use provision. Whatever that be, we can discuss in detail, whether it's items for adult activity parks or what. Okay. We're skipping item 50 to do right at the end when we switch the camera off. Item 51, internal audit. The bad news is the internal control check has not been completed,
That's the next.
which is the next item. I mean, the internal audit. Rich has outlined where we were found wanting and how we can put it right, basically.
We have put it right.
But that we have, yes. Can you two stop talking and listen to what's going on, please? Councillor Blackburn.
Sorry, I had a look at this, and just the one thing, because the next thing is about the Constitution. I noticed the wording on the what's it called, the Transparency Code. Something about it says something about the Constitution not required by law. I mean that could be still a true statement, couldn't it? But maybe does that need amending, Rich? Or?
I mean, I don't think this is complicated. When I look at some other parish councils' constitutions, and it doesn't say much, it's not much else than saying you've got 23 councils representing X amount of wards, however, how many meetings you have, yada, yada, yada.
It was just the wording on the Transparency Code, because below the heading Constitution, it says not required by law. You put not required by law. But then I'm just kind of trying to reconcile that with item 2, isn't it, about
Yeah.
the constitution? Just wondered
Well, it's
that-
probably not a law, it's probably not a law, it's
not
probably
required
a,
by
it's
law.
probably a,
Yeah, that's
you
what
know.
I'm seeking clarification really, perhaps
Yeah.
it isn't, yeah.
Well, our, you know, our,
Yeah.
it's on our, it's, you know, it's identified in the code for us to have it,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
whether it's identified.
Is this
or
one,
not.
is this one to raise with like YMCA now, and just see if there's a template?
Richard already got them,
No,
you were
I-
busy talking and you
I
missed
had a
that
look
bit.
to see if there was a template on that, there isn't a template, but most of, you know, every parish council seems to have one, and they're quite simple really, it's basically 2 pages describing how the council works and.
But I think, well, when I saw this, for any other voluntary organisation, I know we're a very special type of organisation, the Constitution is a really serious document that would have to go to an annual council meeting, probably approved by 2/3 of the membership. So I'm not saying we can't just knock it out or borrow somebody else's and change the name, because I'm sure there will be ones we can use. But it felt to me like it was an annual council issue, not a normal. But I don't.
Well, it's got to be
I'm
approved
surprised.
every year, you mean?
No, just to be approved in the first place, because the
Oh,
Constitution
no,
is
not an
normally-
ordinary council meeting, an annual council.
Yeah, because it is.
Yeah.
It's
not
law,
ordinary
it's
business.
your overall governing document.
Yeah,
And I was
appreciate
really,
that.
I was confused as to why we haven't got one if we needed one, because I thought surely that would have been the first thing that was written when the parish was
Well,
established.
we've just established we don't have to have one by law, but the internal audit felt that we should have one.
But I think that's a really good point. But I think there's all sorts of things like this, like the fact you've not got a business plan, you've not got a 4-year plan. You know, that's something you, Councillor, pointed out, didn't it, when you started? There's lots of these kind of things that you might think are obvious, but they're not there. So
Slowly but surely, Doug. We're plowing
I
through
think the
them.
constitution's a bit more.
But I think your point about it going to the annual council meeting, not an ordinary one, is
Yeah.
probably a good idea.
well, perhaps it's another thing that needs a working group. If it's something that we, you know, because I think Councillor Carey is right. It's an overview of what the council is for and what it does and what its purpose is and who it
In which
benefits
case,
and
I
why.
suggest we put it on the agenda for the next full council meeting and say, and at that council meeting, the objective of it being on the agenda is to get a working group together to look at a constitution which we would like to be ready by the annual meeting, for approval by the annual meeting. Whether we get anybody volunteering is an interesting.
It's not an overly big job if there's fairly.
No, it does, but we struggle to get anybody to do anything, as you well know.
I think the previous.
And the 4 people who do, the 4 or 5 people who do it, are possibly full up at the moment. Okay. So we note the constitution point, and we've just agreed what we're going to do about it.
Okay.
And then item 5.2, I'm afraid the internal control check did not happen. So we need somebody to do this, and it can't be me because I'm chair of FNM. It takes.
It takes about an hour.
Yeah,
and a
it's
half.
about 1 hour's time. Can anybody bring themselves to Charles? Could you come in one day for an
I think
hour?
Mary might have been volunteering for.
Yeah, but Mary always volunteers. I was hoping I
Well,
could
it's
promote Charles over Mary.
You could have the vice chair to do it.
You could have-
Yeah, that's the vice
Vice
chair.
That's a very good point.
Oh,
That's a very
yeah.
good point.
Good point, okay, fine.
All right, agreed.
I've got absolutely no interest in doing it, but if it needs to be done.
It has to be done by law
Okay.
and by desirability.
I'll do it.
Thank you,
That's
Doug.
great, thank you.
I
Right,
still don't know what it means though. And when you say.
No, you've got a checklist and you just got to work through paperwork and
with you in here.
No, well, I will be
Yes.
here.
It's an
You're
online
basically checking bank statements against records and checking that X, Y, Z are in place and.
there is a list of things you write yes, no in little boxes.
So like I'm an inspector.
Yeah, you're kind of like a.
You're an internal.
Yeah, you're like an auditor.
It is an internal audit. You should all be reminded
feel like you're after a hat.
You should all be reminded that this council pays for an internal auditor and an external auditor, and both of them are done by external auditors. You may think the internal auditor is internal, but it isn't. It's external. They're both external, but one of them is called internal because it's intended for councillors, and the other is called external because it's intended for parishioners. You will be doing what everybody in the real world
So you'll
would
be
call...
the intro.
Let me finish, Charles.
Have you been on some training, Councillor Colley?
What you will be doing will be what normal people would call an internal audit.
Right, okay.
I think you'd cope.
And Rich will guide you through it. I've done it a
It's
couple
very
of
easy,
times
yeah, very
myself.
easy.
It's not difficult.
If we do decide to go into Unity Trust, as it says here, most of it you can just log on and do most of it. So you wouldn't need to go into the office.
I think I've read all Rich's stuff. It seems to me that a good idea to shift the account as Rich recommends.
To Unity Trust.
Yes.
Are we all in favour?
So, yeah.
Yeah. And we note that Handelsbank, and now that they know all our grandmother's birthdays and everything, are content.
Maybe I should ask a naive question then. So are we still, explain to me how many accounts we've got and why. Does the Handelston Bank still exist? I'm assuming that's still our...
I mean, a lot of the reasons we have multiple accounts is so we've got money in different pots. So if any of these banks go bust, we've got...
You're only covered up to a certain...
We're covered up to about 85,000. So we've got Handelsbank, and we've got one account with them. We've got two accounts currently with HSBC. We've got what's that called? We've got the account. We've got 75,000 in with CAF Bank.
Charities.
Oh, right, yeah. That's what the line charities used to use that, yeah.
And then there'll be the Unity Trust accounts. I would suggest we just close the close the HSBC current account. Potentially keep the savings account just so we've got another pot that's safe.
Because that's what this transfer is about, really. It's about the current account banking, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the authorisation of...
And it was also
and the
because
record keeping.
when, interest rates are looking more promising for people who've got money in the bank at the moment, but at one point, by leaving our money in a savings account, we were losing money every month because we got charged for it.
Well, we'll still be charged it. I mean, part of the real reason, as Councillor Green says, it was about the authorisation is the anti-fraud stuff. Because at the moment, I basically do everything. I could walk off with every pound the council's got, and I don't think anybody noticed for like 2 months probably.
I noticed you weren't here. Yeah, Jeff would notice you're not here.
But the point of this system, I think it's quite good. So myself or Jen would be set up as people to set up the payments, but we wouldn't actually pay the people, so it'd be mandated councillors. So I think that's good because it's actually down to the councillors to do the actual authorisation, which it obviously isn't now.
I've just another organisation which had just moved to Unity Trust Bank. It took the usual 3 months to actually get through the process, but I'm now set up to authorise the payments, and it is literally just,
Right, oh, that's good.
Yeah, it takes longer to log in than it does to actually authorise the payments. But it's fine, it's straightforward, it's really good.
Do we all approve that?
Yes.
Right. Financial records are on the website. The Honours Board has been updated, and we need to make it clear that we can never ever, until this board is full, elect anybody to the chair who has a double-barrelled surname. Because we'll be completely stymied.
Or has degrees.
Yes, or has degrees and they insist on listening. Yes. But no, we can't. It needs to go into standing orders that we may not have a chair with a double-barrelled surname. Utility aid. Oh yes, we're waiting to hear back from utility aid.
I'll chase them this week. Yeah.
We don't have to spend all the money that would be involved in in an election, we can co-opt a council member. Is the 3rd of October the date of the full council? Is that?
It is, so the purpose of bringing this up here really is
Is
so
to get
that
nominations.
nominations have looked at the procedure, because we don't have a policy on this. So it's just to give an opportunity to comment, if you want to, but otherwise it could just be that it's noted that this is how things are going to happen.
Well, then it's probably also worth noting that if people have got nominations for co-option, the papers will need to go out a week before the 3rd of October, won't they? They'll need to go out to full council 7 days before that meeting. And for one of them, for one of our councillors, that means post. I mean, for several, but for one, it's only post, isn't it? Doug's the idea.
Am I right in thinking, you did put it on Facebook, didn't you, that there was a vacancy? Did I right?
Yeah, yeah.
Thinking,
Yeah.
so even, I mean, I know it's not the most desirable of roles perhaps for people who find it, but it wasn't that we didn't tell people that was an option. You
No.
made an effort.
No,
So no, it is- it is out, yeah.
it was on, yeah.
But we haven't announced the co-option yet. It's just that there's a vacancy.
Well, that's like, I mean, I think the co-options are, well, it's a much more sensible way to fill it. And so
Well, certainly for the amount of time involved, it would be a shame to spend all that money on an election for 6 months.
Yeah.
Charles, you had your hand up.
Yeah, can I just ask, this is more relevant to this co-option, but I suppose it will also be relevant to next year. There's a criteria that must be met to be eligible to stand. You know, there's like, do you live here, do you work here, a few bits and bobs like that. Do we actually check that is entirely true, and perhaps, you know, stuff like that we don't have somebody who's, shall we say, temporarily employed by a local business, but not really for a very short period of time, just so
Well,
that they...
Doug's was the last co-option. Were you here when Doug's was co-opted with it?
No.
No, you weren't either, were you? I don't know how thoroughly we went through it.
I was a resident, I was on the polling register, wasn't I?
Yeah, but I don't know whether we bothered to check.
But we obviously can check. I mean, James,
Well, perhaps actually that's hitting the nail on the head for the level of detail. So if it's somebody who isn't on the polling, so if it's somebody who is
If they're not on the electoral register.
simply verifiable as being eligible, if they're doing it through other means, it's to produce evidence of that.
Yeah.
And so the concern that I might have would be, I would like to see legal, legit pay slips as proof of employment. Or, you know, so for example, somebody who might be like a cash in hand cleaner, perhaps, wouldn't meet that criteria, in my opinion. And I would
I'm
rather.
not saying we couldn't have a cleaner on the council just because they're paid cash in hand.
No. Anybody who's cash in hand isn't going to be, there's not going to be paperwork to back up the fact that the job actually exists, and especially if you're cash in hand cleaning for your mum, that might be a bit of a different matter. It's about somebody producing the evidence to establish that they meet the eligibility criteria. So, unfortunately, if somebody's getting paid cash in hand and not claiming to the tax man, they're not going to have the evidence to back it up.
But there's lots of different criteria they could meet.
There is.
So you know, if they can
whatever it is.
produce evidence for one of those,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the irony is that you don't actually do the check until after they've been co-opted.
Oh, really?
It's after they've completed
Dogs, you're fired.
What, are we not allowed to do it? Are we not allowed to check all candidates before we voted them in on the night?
You tell them, you know, that they are informed of the eligibility criteria, but in terms of the checking, it doesn't happen until afterwards. I know.
But then if they don't fail the check, they're not co-opted.
Yeah.
Right.
So
start again.
Yeah.
Right.
What my concern is perhaps, and it probably won't happen at co-option because the existing members of the council will need to approve it, it's probably more likely to occur next year, which is where somebody who's not from the valley, for reasons, wants to be on the parish, but actually, perhaps, not for good reasons. And the onus is to prove that you do have that link.
Yeah. You can't just put your uncle's address down.
And I have to say, in the past, I felt that some of those have been tenuous, really tenuous when you look into the reality of what it is and what it back with a vengeance, next May.
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean by next May.
Well, next year when we're all up for election,
Oh, yeah.
there might be a good number of people who put the name down to stand, whose connection to the Home Valley is not what it perhaps used to be,
Right.
and therefore strictly, or rather, should I say, legally, wouldn't be eligible,
Right.
but might wish to stretch it to some extent. But
Right.
it's about being eligible and remaining eligible.
But on the, when it becomes the election, a formal election, you have to register with electoral services.
And you have to
And
take
they
the
go
boxes.
through with a fine
Yes, it's
system.
different.
And they put me through the ringer because they weren't going to let me use my name, Doug's as my name, and then I was,
Yeah, they put you
It's
through
not
a
us that
fine
has
for
to
day
check.
one, but maybe
Right.
not month two,
right,
when.
but it's electoral services who.
No, it's not our
who approve
responsibility,
the
it's electoral services. We're
I know where you're
responsible.
coming from, I can see there could be a slate of people might appear from.
But listen, we can't be adding more things onto our list of
No,
things to do.
it's simply a case of establishing that somebody who's putting themselves forward is actually legally eligible for it. So,
Well, maybe we should, rather than, we need to trust electoral services to do that when it's an election. But maybe we have a thing where everybody is checked every year, everybody has to update their, place of residence.
well, the onus would be on the individual councillor to proactively declare that they no longer met the criteria. That's what they ought to be doing. I'm not sure that's happening.
Yeah, but that, if you're saying people are doing it for nefarious reasons, then they won't.
Correct.
But if we could, without too much extra work for officers, have a questionnaire that we have to fill out every single year, in time for each annual council that says, I still work at such a place, I still live.
It would only apply to those who don't actually live in the parish area.
Yeah.
Are we sure that people can become debarred by that? I mean, once they're elected, are they elected for 4 years? Are they, whatever happens, are they still there for 4 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
what-
absolutely certain that the eligibility is continuing, but it might be worth checking.
Oh right,
Yeah,
so
it'd
if
be
you
interesting to
move,
know that.
if you move after a year, you can be debarred, is that what you're saying, Charles?
Well, that could apply
Yeah,
to one of our.
I mean, I was just about to say that, we might have
Yeah.
one councillor
Yeah.
who's strictly that applies to
Yeah,
currently,
Oh right.
yeah. So,
but
but it would be interesting to know exactly what that, possibly if once you're elected for 4 years, that's it for 4 years, but possibly if you might be becoming eligible, but we need to know, I guess. Maybe not.
So can I suggest that we do, that officers contact councillors every year in time for the annual general meeting?
Well,
I think we need to get established first of all,
Yeah,
whether,
right.
logically we need to establish first of all whether you can be removed
Right.
if you cease to
If you
meet the
start
eligibility.
doing it, right.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true as well. Yeah.
I think once you're elected, you're elected.
Well,
But
I
we're
suspect
talking
you
about-
are, but I
I could be
don't know.
wrong. I just don't know.
I think the eligibility is a continuing eligibility.
You think
Yeah.
right, so,
So that's what
but
it
we need
seems-
to know, yeah.
Yeah, on day one, it seems,
We need to know.
But and obviously whoever the candidate is, or the candidates are, need to be aware of what the eligibility criteria is and going forward.
Because an MP can live anywhere they like.
Well, yeah, but as I would have said, they need to be ordinarily resident within the United
Yeah,
Kingdom.
but
Because that's the structure to which they're elected.
Well, yes, within the UK, but have we got parish councillors who don't live in the UK?
No, I think we've had parish councillors who don't live in the parish council area.
Yeah, but MPs, the point I was making is MPs can live anywhere they like in the UK, they don't have to be anywhere near their constituents.
But Michael Boxer lives in Almere, represents Brockles, so for the organisation that he's a member of, he needs to live within its geography. So for Westminster, that geography would be United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland. When you're on Kirklees, that geography would be Kirklees' geography. On Home Valley Parish Council, it would be Home Valley Parish Council. So somebody from anywhere in the valley could represent any ward.
Yeah, well, Sarah Sheard and Michael are both, one lives in Rockholds, represents Homley, and one
Right,
lives
yeah,
in Wembley.
and there's no issue with that.
No,
because
because
they're
There's
not-
been previous councillors who lived in Marston.
I beg your pardon?
There's been previous councillors on this committee who lived in Marston.
Oh, right.
So I'm assuming they must have met one of the other three criteria. all neighbourhood
Yes.
checks.
Anyway, we're agreed what we're going to do. We're going to check whether you're elected for 4 years. We're agreed that. It's our responsibility when it's a co-option, and it's the responsibility of of electoral services when it's an election. We're going to check whether you are elected for a full term or just for as long as you're there. If it's only as long as you're there, we'll have a form every year to say I still live on or work wherever.
It would be good to do that with DPIs as well,
Okay.
to make sure
Let's
DPIs
move
are
on.
refreshed.
Can I just say, maybe, would it be helpful then, when this goes to full council, that we co-opt subject to a successful eligibility check rather than co-opt?
Yeah.
If we're doing it after the event, we
Yeah.
should.
Well, so you say with the
Hopefully that'll be a
CRD,
smooth process for whoever's chosen anyway, won't it? Because if they've got their polling cards, they're in, aren't they?
Well, they won't have a polling card. We'll have to look on the electoral
Yes,
register.
but you know what I mean.
that is the case, that it is subject to the eligibility. Oh my word! I can't even say it now. Subject to the check. So, but that they only formally have to do that when they are submitting their declaration of interest. But there's nothing to stop councillors questioning them about the eligibility criteria when they put themselves forward. That's something you question them on.
And I think for somebody who doesn't live in the area, that would be a more than legitimate line of
Yes.
Yeah.
But the co-option allows you to do that. The all-out election doesn't. There is nobody doing that. Really.
Okay, let's move on. We all agree, and we're over time here. Publicity, I think we should continue doing it. I think we need to remind grant recipients to mention us. As I say, Conley didn't mention the apple orchard. And we talked earlier about finding ways of making ourselves, maybe we need to attend more things like Doug's drop-in, where we say, did you know we do grants? Is there one planned for Home First, did you say, Doug?
There's a series of 4, one in the Tech, one in Honley, one in Melton and one in Marston.
Well, we don't need to go to Melton and Marston, but we want to
You
go
only need to go to one, it doesn't matter which one you go to, it's all the same. It would make sense for you to attend, if you're available to either go to the Honley one on the 6th.
Why do you only need to go to one?
Because the 6th, because we're just going
But
through.
presumably it'll be different people at each meeting.
No, because you're coming to see me or somebody else who's going to do an interview with you to say, Pat, are you on the right mailing lists?
No, I think we agreed that we want to attend as people, not
There's no platform for you to speak to anybody else, but it's
a drop-in.
It's a drop-in to check that, are you on our mail? Have we got the right contact for the parish council? Do you need any volunteers, or do you need any information about grant funding? Do you deliver any services about health and wellbeing? Should you be on the community directory? And all of those are really quite interesting questions for the parish council, because in theory you could appear on the Go Please community directory. There's no reason why you shouldn't be on there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you probably aren't, because you probably don't think of yourself as a voluntary organisation, but you sort of are. But that is sit down and have a conversation.
Can you let Jen know when the alternative date is, because it'll be her evening she's giving up to attend.
Yeah, some of them are daytime, some of them are nighttime.
It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. All the organisations in and around the valley that we know about and we prompt. Maybe the real benefit with making it crystal clear in third sector leaders that you exist as a funder, maybe because there's organisations that we don't know of that may like to do something, but don't know where they'll get the money from.
Right.
So that, for example, it could be like an almond-breed community group that wants to do something and they think, oh, we could do that further, how do we fund it? They won't necessarily, because they don't live in a parish area, they won't necessarily know about it. We won't know. So there is that bit about making it a more visible means of funding.
And I think maybe there's a role for individual councils as well. Particularly if we haven't got many grant requests in, perhaps we need to
It's very worrying that we've got those.
Yeah. Emailing out the groups in our area and our ward and
We
so.
extended the deadline now to 26th. I know there's one in my inbox. So, you know, it's the 26th. It would not surprise me if we don't get more.
Oh, I think it might be a push.
I mean, I would ask the question, is the fact that we've gone from offering grants as and when people have the ideas and the need to sort of say you've got to wait, that could cause issues for some in terms of the timing of it. And you've got that bit of, if somebody became aware today, they might not be able to get the paperwork in for September, then they wait till April. But if this is a project you want it to roll out in February, how does that work?
Well, we make exceptions as we have today, looking at the text application.
Once they've applied and been through it, then we'll say we'll make an exception for it, but they might look at it and think, oh, this ain't going to work for us, there's no point.
No, Charles, right from the outset, when we talked either whether we'd only do it once a year or twice a year, we agreed that we had to be sufficiently flexible to allow for people who weren't familiar, were, you know, or didn't fit in, or it was urgent, and that we will have that flexibility to say we can consider individual applications outside of the application date.
But they'll only be aware of that flexibility after they've spoken to us, and they might not bother speaking to us because they might think that they've missed the deadline. Lots of other grant bodies just do not offer that kind of flexibility.
Well,
It's a
we want
cut-off
to
and-
put something on, maybe we can put a phrase on the website, but what we don't want is everybody saying, oh, you don't have to bother to get it in on time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So we need to be...
I'd just like the grants working group needs to report back for me, doesn't it?
Yes,
This is one of
we're
the-
talking about the whole thing about application and monitoring processes, so we need to consider that in there, yes. But I mean, I think we've always agreed, even when we said however infrequently we will grant grants, that we would always have the flexibility for an organisation that was new to everything or for...
Well, there's an interesting one that I hadn't really thought about this, but when we are okay to talk checks, this is sort of slightly up, please. There was a conversation with Cafe 100, and I spoke to Rich about it because Cafe 100.
Are you okay for this to be recorded?
Or we could just run meetings.
Actually, we've finished the agenda, we could move to the not recorded bit. Yeah, so we'll switch that off. You do this, then we'll do Monty's one.
Yeah, so Cafe 100 are after actually some money to refurbish their youth space. And I hadn't thought about it, but in theory, if we've got all that money in earmark reserves, that could be eligible, that could use some of that money, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
refurbishment.
Yeah, well, I'm saying, like, if you like,
There's
no shortage.
That's what we need to know from her,
The
please.
problem they've got, and this is an issue we need to take to the grant working group, because they're in a church-owned space, even though it's absolutely secular, no involvement with the church whatsoever, there's a ban on funding churches, and they can't apply because it's technically not their. They can apply, but if they refurbish a room, it becomes the room that belongs to the church, not to them. They haven't even got a lease. So these are really quite.
So
And it's something you've
so
got
that's
to-
how you help. Well,
No,
that's
I've
you
already
flexible.
circulated notes that cover exactly this point to the members of the working group that found a phrase that said we would not give grants to places of worship where it was purely for the furthering of worship.
Yeah, that's because that's the exclusion that I worded, but then Richard advised me that legally we just aren't allowed to fund churches. End of.
If you're funding the fixtures of a building owned by a church, that's a no.
But we can fund the New Life
You can fund.
food bank.
You can fund. Like I said to you.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said to you, you can fund the fitting. If they've got things that are not nailed down, you can fund that.
We can find ways around it. Okay, let's.
I think
We've got one more item on the agenda. I think we've wasted quite a lot of time tonight, given there's only 4 of us.